I've helped survivors of human trafficking now for more than 10 years, and I've educated people about the realities of modern slavery and human trafficking for almost as long. A few years ago, I started the Masterpieces of Broken Pieces project, in which survivors, local survivors of human trafficking right here in the US, created art from broken jewelry, discarded books, unwanted items. The project had some wonderful and unexpected results as we did plates and paintings and sculptures. The act of creating the art helps survivors learn skills such as how to use a regular tool, how to show up somewhere on time. It helped them relearn how to make choices in freedom, which is something that people were denied when they are trafficked. We found that focusing on art calmed them and reduced PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder episodes. We sold some of the art, paired with some of their stories, which helped educate donors and the public, and also provided some income for survivors. All of those were important, but they were almost insignificant compared to something else. The project helped them reframe their lives. They were turning what was broken, whether it was the jewelry, the books, or paper, into a beautiful new masterpiece. Yes, it helped when some of their work ended up in a Penn State art gallery, but most significantly, the project as a metaphor helped them realize that they were a masterpiece of broken pieces, despite the fact that they thought that their lives were in shambles and that they couldn't do things that other normal people could do. They realized through this project and over time that they were beautiful people. The project used two OD, organizational development, knowledge management tools, without us calling it that. Used two tools that I found very successful in making social change, and in particular in balancing the scales of justice. One is storytelling. The other is reframing for what is positive and possible. Storytelling. So those of you who know the work of Brene Brown, she and some of the other quantitative sciences, when they hear the word storytelling, they're going, that will delight the magic pixies. It may, at best, be considered by quantitative scientists as fluffy. At worst, they may consider it horrifying. The truth is, everybody loves a good story. A good story connects, it engages, and it helps us respond to each other as people, simply people and humans. Storytelling imparts values, even when our cultures may be different. The US loves good versus evil, and good loves to triumph. We love short stories. We love stories that are in the past tense. This is what has happened and this is the great ending. Augustine may tell us that in Ghana, themes of stories are much more complex. People are both good and evil, and a trickster can learn lessons along the way. A person in India may appreciate a much longer story than someone in the US. But here's a commonality I found, and that is, no matter where I was, I found that stories helped impart not just knowledge, but wisdom. It imparted values. What is important to us as people, and what matters to us within not just our bodies, but our hearts and our souls. In the case of masterpieces of broken pieces and survivors, they would begin with a story that went something like, once upon a time, I was sold for sex. Yet, today I became an artist, and my work of art was seen in an art gallery. Storytelling is something that can cut through. It can be used online, whether it's in a blog, whether it's the written word, whether it's socially, done in person. It can be used through art and song. So it engages more of us than simply reading down a PowerPoint slide. I love it because it also enables reframing. For those of you who have not been part of ODKM, reframing is choosing a specific view or one mindset to focus on in a world of possibilities. By way of example, would everyone please take a look at the photo on the left side, okay? There are lots and lots of things to look at in this photo, as there are in any particular moment in time. There are loads of things to focus on. Then take a look at something that particularly jumps out at you. What we notice is what matters to us. So some of the things that you may focus on are the things that are framed in the small pieces of this photo on the right side. You may be looking at the train. You may be looking at the garden of red poppies. You might even just be focusing on the fact that this scene is about enabling someone to go somewhere they want to go. There are ways you can teach and learn reframing. It's enabled by modeling, showing how to do it. Storytelling provides us with different frames of the same reality. There's a technique in consulting. For some of you in ODKM, you'll have it soon. Tojo Thatcham Carey's consulting class offers techniques in appreciative inquiry. I won't go into that now, but that's a great way of doing it. And simply pointing out when someone is reframing their lives. It works wherever and whenever a brain is engaged. So I think that particularly during the pandemic, when we can't be together and our brains are they're unfocused at times and foggy, and we're dealing with a lot of awakening of different realities during the current circumstances. Reframing through storytelling has amazing possibilities. Survivors were reframing their lives through the metaphor of using different pieces of broken stuff. They were beginning to, they used reframing sequentially. They began with thinking that they were what society had told them. I am trash. They reframed to say, I am a human, not riffraff. They next moved on to realizing I am a victim of sex trafficking. I was not just a person who was born bad, or a person who was arrested for criminal prostitution. I was a victim of sex trafficking. Then they began to reframe. I am a survivor. I'm a survivor of human trafficking. No longer a victim. That was my past. The ultimate is when a survivor of human trafficking reframes himself or herself as, I am a person doing what they love in freedom. As we hear our next two speakers tell their stories, please listen for their use of storytelling and reframing in their projects. Listen deeply. That's how we learn. I'm happy to introduce Freda Maddox, Sheriff of Chester County, Pennsylvania. I met Freda when she was an attorney representing victims of domestic violence and abused children, and I was conducting training on human trafficking. Today, and as of January, she is the very first African-American sheriff in our county, and our county has been around since 1682. Story by story, she is changing the notions of whether people are enemies or whether they have commonalities as community members. She's also making change, huge change in our entire community. Freda, take it away.
Hi, everybody. And Carol, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here today. So a little bit about me. Carol gave a whole lot. I am an attorney, I'm a sheriff, but I'm also obviously an African-American woman, and I'm the mother of 3 African-American children. And something happened to me, maybe about 40 years ago, that after I had retired, I served with state police for a number of years. I knew most of law enforcement, but when I was traveling, I was actually stopped by police. And this was probably right after Sandra Bland had been mysteriously died while in the care of law enforcement. And also we had, other incidents like we see now unfolding. And when I got stopped, I was driving in a more affluent community. I was scared, and I found myself really feeling overwhelmed and nervous. And I said to myself, if I am feeling this way, what happens? And I know the drill. African Americans, we give our kids what we call the black talk. If you ever get stopped by the police, you put your hands on the steering wheel. It's yes, sir, no, sir. Be as polite as you can. Don't talk back. So I knew everything to do because I had been in law enforcement all those years. But yet, even myself, I felt myself very concerned. So from there, that was part of the motivation that made me want to run for this position. And it was like, I have to make a change in the community. And everyone's talking about criminal justice reform and social justice issues. But in Chester County, I'm like, how can we talk about these issues when there's no one who looks like me who has a seat at the table, when we know overwhelmingly these issues impact people of color? So I ran, and here I am. So now I sit there and I say, okay, God, why me? And I kind of feel like for this season, who would have ever imagined that we would be dealing with a COVID pandemic and then civil unrest, which is dealing with the shootings of unarmed people of color. And I'm finding that at least with the protests, I have an opportunity to not only have a seat at the table, and I'm very outspoken on it, but also to work with the young kids or the young people in our community, because I feel that really it's that generation that is going to make the change that we all say that we want to see, that we've been asking for a long time, but I really do believe that it's going to lead to that. So I have been working with the group as a result of the Black Lives Matter march. We had in Westchester, we had one of our first marches, and it was peaceful. Thank goodness it was. It was about 5,000 people that showed up. And from there were a lot of young people who really wanted to have a voice. And at this time, I really think it's important that they speak. They have their ideas. They have been deeply affected by what has happened. And so it's a group that I've been working with in Westchester called Sanjay Strong. It was started by a woman whose son was a victim of gun violence. And she just made that into a platform to work with young people. And one of the first things that we did when we walked in town, it was very interesting. We've been working and dialoguing with the police because I feel that it's very important that law enforcement can see things from the lens of people of color, and that people of color can see things perhaps from the lens of police. But I believe really this is a heart issue, and we have to really get to the heart of the matter. Some of the young people had positive, there were law enforcement officers that really made a positive impact on them. They talked about a gentleman out in the area of town where they said, he makes us feel like we're one of his kids, that we really matter. When he sees us at the school bus stop, he'll just say, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? How's school going? If he has school supplies, he'll give it to them. And so one of the questions was, because one of them had raised the issue that they had actually had a friend who had been a victim of sexual abuse going on in the home. But because they did not trust law enforcement, they did not want to come forward, because right now in the African-American community primarily, because of what is going on, they do not want to call the police. And we don't want that. We need the police, but the police also need us to help solve problems. But they said this particular officer, that they felt comfortable sharing something so, I guess, traumatic, because, you know, guys on this line, you know that when you're dealing with sexual violence, assault, domestic violence, a lot of times that is something that's kept hidden and secret, and you don't want to share. You don't share to sometimes your family members, yet alone to a police officer, male, especially in this culture right now where you don't trust them. So we're building bridges. And, you know, the kids just talked about really what was on their heart from being stopped. And the officers began to see that if 16 years old, you are out and got your first, I guess, driving lesson, and the first thing that happens when you pull off the lot, you're stopped, that's going to impact you forever. Because most of us remember the first time we started driving. We remember our Sweet 16 parties. We remember those things. And if it comes out to be a negative, that's something that can never be taken away, because even as you start sharing stories with your children one day, they'll say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, when you first started driving, tell me about your experience. And it's like, when I started driving, I got stopped by the police and my hands were on the steering wheel and I was scared to death. So I just believe we have to continue to do more and more dialogue. We are. And, you know, not just with young people, but even in the community. But I think more so than the large groups, sometimes people want to hold these town hall meetings, but it can become a shouting match because we're so polarized as a society right now. It's us against them, that really to make meaningful impact, it's going to be the more of the hands-on working with individuals. And as we get to know you, you get to know us, we'll be like, it's not so bad. At least that's my hope. I don't know what I haven't covered, but I can just say right now, irregardless of who wins this election, my big concern is there will be more protests, no matter who wins, no matter who wins. The anger and the tension, and for my office, we issue gun permits, that has gone through the roof. People coming to get firearms for protection. So I just say, hold on to your seat. And I wish I could say the best is yet to come. If we work together, the best is yet to come. But until at least November or a few days afterwards, I think we're in, as a country, I'm just being honest, from what I see, we're in for a pretty rough ride. So that's all I have to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Freda. I'm going to put in one plug, or just let people know two things that happened at that meeting. It was extremely profound, and I knew that something pretty amazing and deep had happened between law enforcement and the young people when the kids pronounced one of the deputies as being cool, and the other was both law enforcement and all members of the youth group, without even being prompted, unanimously voted to get together again. So just an amazing thing, what your story, sharing your story and sharing the positive stories of what that other officer did to help really opened up space for dialogue. Next, let's hear from Jason Gonzalez. I met Jason when he was planning a conference at the United Nations in November, and I was a speaker. He and a small team pulled off a complete change of venue and a revamp of the conference format in 2 weeks when things changed. There were hundreds of participants from dozens of countries, and to make a change like that was nothing short of a miracle. So when he says he and his team are going to make the world healthier by 2035, I completely believe him. Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you, Freda, for sharing that perspective. And so my name is Jason, and I work for UNICEF's Office of Innovation. And what part of our work is to help the young people around the world, especially in the most disadvantaged countries, have a brighter future and to write their story and empower them. Of the 1.8 billion young people in the world, there's 1.8 billion futures that have to be written. And that's part of the work we're currently doing with a cool project between UNICEF's Office of Innovation, the Lancet, and the Financial Times Commission on Governing Health Futures. And this project is called Imagining Health Futures, and it ties back to storytelling and empowering young people to have a voice central to the discussion around, what does the future 2035 or even 2045 look like, and what can the United Nations do about that? UNICEF is the world's leading organization for children, working in 190 countries and territories to protect children's rights. And we've spent 70 years working to improve their lives and the lives of their families. So when we approach young people, we approach them from an assets-based perspective, convinced of their promise and focus on their strengths. So coming up in the middle of September, we're planning on an online dialogue that's going to ask 5 key questions of young people. And initially starting with, what do you think? Do you think that 2045 will be better, worse, the same as today? What do you want to see in 2045 when the United Nations turns 100, considering technology, existing poverty and inequality, migration, climate change, all these issues that are important to each of us in our own way? And what are the main obstacles and challenges that will block their vision or your vision of health futures? And then what can the UN do to address it? So a small step that we're taking over the next few months is working with science fiction authors to help participate in writer's room style workshops with 4 to 5 young people in different regions around the world, in West Africa, in Asia Pacific, and we're exploring also Latin America, to give 4 to 5 young people from our program countries an opportunity they wouldn't have had to contribute their ideas and fill in the details around, what is the life of a young person? And these short stories, which will be authored, will be eventually published through one of our partnering outlets throughout 2021. And the cool thing about this is, science fiction is really cool for some passionate science fiction readers, or just a unique way of including their voices by this commission. But also, this is a unique opportunity that will inform a report that's going to be published in the Lancet in 2021 that explores the convergence of digital health, AI, and other frontier technologies with universal health coverage, and help support the attainment of the 3rd Sustainable Development Goal, which is health. And this commission is made up of stakeholders from World Health Organization, UNICEF, and other leading organizations around the world, 15 plus sort of representatives who have this input. And these short stories, we think, is a unique way of adding creativity to this otherwise kind of essentially boring report that is going to be read by policymakers and governments. But young people are really at the core of this discussion, because young people are going to be us in the future. So so that's something that we're working on, and I thought it's tied really nicely to Carol's initial framing of this when we talk about reframing and storytelling. This is just one component we're doing, but ultimately through our everyday work, we always try to keep young people core to our work, and we, even when we focus on other solutions and programming, it's always from a rights-based perspective, and making sure they're central to our programming. So I'll drop in the chat a few of our social channel links to UNICEF Innovation, and keep an eye out and watch that space, because we really want to share this campaign essentially with as many networks and as far as possible to get engagement. Because one of our main takeaways from this dialogue will be, these will be summarized and shared as part of the UN's 75th commemoration, and they'll use it to inform their future activities. It's not just a random campaign that we want to do to engage young people, but it really will have meaning and an impact.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks to both Freda and Jason, not just for sharing your time with us and sharing your stories today, but also for the work you're doing. It makes such a difference. These things have ripple effects. Would you all please, now this is your turn just to have 2 moments of interactivity. I hope you are asked to bring pen and paper or crayons or something to this particular session. Would you please pull those out, trace your hand, and on that hand, write your name and one thing that you've done for social justice, or an issue that matters a lot to you. Just take a couple of moments. When you're done, if you would please hold up your hand. And that talks about your issue to the camera, please. While everyone's doing that, while you're drawing your hands, when you're done, you've put it up to the camera, take a few moments to look at some of the issues that people are working with. And I just realized things are backwards unless we mirror our screens. We'll get it though.
It shows up normally to us.
Oh, it does. Okay, I'm looking at on my screen and it's absolutely backwards. Thank you. If you would just take a couple of moments there. All right, okay. I'm seeing somebody's, maybe J.D. Foster. Let's see if glasses will help. This is tiny. One more moment, folks. I hope you're all having a chance to see some of these leading workshops. Thank you, folks. So if you take a look at some of the things that we're seeing here, we're seeing education, mental health, working against racism, health, we already talked about, human trafficking, all of these wonderful things. I would encourage you to talk to the people that are in this session. After this session ends, what we find is, as we share stories and connect, the world changes. The people around you, every human around you is deep. They've all got books inside them, their own stories. As we begin to share those stories, we listen deeply, we speak from the heart, the world changes. As a last note before Q&A, hopefully we'll have a few minutes of time for that. This particular screen is a picture of the handprints of human survivors, human trafficking survivors. They had a chance to put their handprints in paint on a wall that was entitled, "These Hands Have." Under the handprint, they wrote something wonderful that their hands had done. For women who had been told over and over and over that they were trash, they'd been called prostitutes and such other horrible names, and had begun to believe that they had no value, this wall gave an opportunity to share stories of what was wonderful and positive about them, and an opportunity for them to reframe their lives and their future. As donors began to see it, members of the public began to see the wall, they began to understand that these are humans. These are humans with stories and wonderful things to their lives. They began giving and lending a hand. Folks, I'm going to say thank you for joining us.